President of the Committee of Elimination of All Sorts of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. Here we have also Nicolás Liendo, Program Officer from the National Institute of for Democracy, IDEA International. And the last member of the international missions, we have Fernanda Gurriel, Joint Director of the Applied Investigation Center of the International Institution for Electoral Systems, AIFE. And then our host is Mrs. Guadalupe Tadei Zavala, the chairperson of this National Electoral Institute. Counselors Norma de la Cruz and Rita Bel Lopez. And Counselor Jaime Rivera. On behalf of INE, we warmly welcome you. We thank you for being here with us. So we shall begin with our report presentation. So before we give the floor to those that are going to tell us what could observe during the last electoral process, we give the warm welcome to our chairperson, Mr. Tadei Zavala. Thank you very much, Ms. Arlen Cabral Porches, and the whole structure of the International Affair Coordination. I saw Rafael Riva Palacio, Juliska, and of course, I would also thank for the General Executive Board. Very early, we're going to start working today, and our Comptroller, Mr. Osvaldo, who's always aware of our calling. So thank you very much to all of you today from different representations. It's an honor to share this presidium with the people that we've just heard about. Welcome you all once again to this, your home. And of course, I would like to share this chair with my fellow consulors, Jaime Rivera, Norma Elena de la Cruz, and Rita Bel Lopez Vences, who's always, is always a pleasure to be here. Now, today, because we're celebrating at the Institute, because it's Jaime Rivera's birthday, so let's give him a round of applause. Well, he asked me, I have to say, not to say anything, that I wouldn't dare to sing happy birthday, but we didn't hear it. So happy birthday to all of you. Really welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with you. To address to yourselves this time is very important to this institute, because we gather together to receive and welcome and thank the reports from the international missions that have observed the federal election process and the local concurrent election processes 2023-2024. I want to express my deepest thanks to each and every one of the international observers that with professionalism and dedication contributed to transparency and legitimacy of our election processes. Their presence and observations are paramount, as usually, to strengthen our democracy and warranty that the leading principles of the election function will be respected. The reports today bestowed are the result of a work and a strong commitment to truth and objectivity. Their analysis and recommendations are not only going to give us an external view, but also they offer the opportunity to be better and perfection our election processes in the coming future. In the last election process, we had more than 1,300 requests to participate as foreign participants coming from 53 different countries. The greatest request and participation of foreign participants since this was instituted in 1994. International missions included the main cities and rural zones of our country, making sure of an observance and a representative observation. These observers were present in the whole processes of the election, so that allowed them to have a complete revision of each and every one of them. So this is why I thank for the impartiality and rigor these people did this work. It has always been sustained in those values. Their observations, as I said, will allow us to identify areas of opportunity and will inspire us to work harder every time to make sure that results of every election will be a faithful reflection of the citizens' will. I'm sure reports will also help us to identify challenges and the need to enhance the training of the election workers and the implementation of additional measurements to prevent the lack of information or disinformation. We'll be aware of the tech innovation reports that were implemented in the last election process, like electric ballots that we calculate give us the perspective of a new generation of instruments for the organization of election processes given to this institution. The electoral observation is a fundamental pillar in the development of democratic processes. The presence of international observers, will give further transparency to this process and strengthens trust of the citizens in the results. It is also a prevention mechanism of possible irregularities, making sure that they will respect it, the regulation and procedures that we have established. The recommendations and reports from the observers will give us a solid base to continuously enhance the election processes that are fair and efficient. Validation of election processes on the part of international observers added to the observation of civil or society organizations and the law reinforce the results of this election and warranty the integrity of the election process. The integrity of the election as a concept that takes the aligning to principles and practices that make sure equitative, transparent, and free elections will be the route that we've had at the INE, where the principles of the electoral we have respected it. I want to thank to people and institutions made this missions possible. Their support and cooperation have been paramount for the success of this exercise of democracy. Their reports are not only enriching on our understanding of the electoral process, but they reinforce also the commitment to transparency, justice, and democracy. I additionally celebrate that in this mission, for the very first time, we were working with expert visitors from foreign countries with a gender perspective. And this will add up to the whole work that Mexico is developing regarding this field. To them, our greatest thankful to all those that with that perspective were observing our process of election. Thank you very much and welcome these representations. Welcome to this report. Well, we kindly thank the words from Ms. Guadalupe Tadei Zavala, the chairperson of this INE, and we add up to her thanks to those that participated in somehow in the observation and with their contributions will make us to have a better job and look for greater electoral integrity in each and every process that we have. As you may understand, due to the dates and due to the agenda, for the sake of the agenda, electoral counselors have an urgent agenda to deal with, so they'll be here for a little while, but they will have to go out once they have to. So thank you for being here. And to start with and start talking about our topic, we'll give the floor to Mr. Jose Thompson, Executive Secretary of UNIORE, to give us a presentation of his report. Good morning, everyone. I kindly greet Mrs. Chairperson, counselors, and colleagues from the accompanying missions of this electoral process, and the workers that made the work possible of this INE, and of course, everyone and each and every one of you for the possibility to exchange what we've witnessed. And as a frequent visitor in Mexico that I am, and this year I've been here like for 5 times, so I've been able to interact, you know, because of this election process. And the very first thing I would like to personally, and also as an executive secretary of the UNIORE, it is to thank publicly to the INE, and it is a triple thanks. First of all, because they made this accompanying scheme possible. Our accompanying was not only devoted to the election process, but we were here in February and March this year, and then in June again, and then we have been able to give some sort of follow-up to the post-electoral process, which makes this observation more complete. This hadn't been possible unless the will of the INE and the possibility to make it feasible. And the second thanks is for the spreading of the reports. At least in the case of UNIORE, the first destination of our reports are the electoral authority. And if they want to give more or less diffusion or spread the word, that would be the possibility so that the citizens, experts, and means of communication will be able to know the international point of view. And I've seen that it's not only been their will, but there's also QR code where you will have a chance to see the reports. And this talks good of transparency that INE wants to give to the international observers. And also thank you for this event, because it has greater value than only symbolic value. Here we have a group of international missions, each and every one of us with an institutional framework of our own, with characteristics of their own, but that they agree to make this Mexican electoral process an opportunity of international communication. And I do believe that this point here is pretty important, and I have to say that it's not been easy to gather all us together today, because the electoral dynamics of Latin America is very agitated these weeks. But well, it's better to be agitated than just being all quiet. But with this in mind, thank you for being here today. A feature of international missions of UNIORE, for you to have a certain context, is that it's an observation from peer to peer. That is to say that missions of UNIORE are fundamentally integrated by justice and workers of the electoral organizations of Latin America and the Caribbean. And these adds up to the technical vision that may be given, so because it's an observation on elections from the part of people that make elections. So that's positive. Observations of UNIORE wants to give a series of recommendations to how to do it better in the future. But also, and the interesting of UNIORE missions is that they are the only ones that we can actually qualify as a two-way road, because we give recommendations and we also learn and we observe what worked and what didn't work in the processes of other countries. And this promotes, as you may understand, a dialogue, international dialogue, a regional dialogue in this case, about elections, how to do it better, and what are the dilemmas of democracy. Because the truth of the matter is that our electoral organizations are not only preparing elections, but they have a series of tasks beyond the election day, and that turns them into permanent specialized entities and autonomous entities that have a very important function. I was telling you that we had accompanying work from the very beginning of the year, and I'm going to tell you when we were here. We were at a very first advanced mission from the 26th to the 29th of February 2024, and the second one was from the 7th to the 11th of April. And these missions were made up by justices and authorities from organizations from Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica, Honduras, and our institution, Inter-American Institute for Human Rights, as part of the executive secretary and part of these missions. The chairman of these or the head of these missions were the registrar of the civil part, Gabriel Penagos. We had reports to the INE from each and every one of these missions, so that we had the best reception regarding these reports. And as the same token, INE helped us to make this observation possible in each and every one of their occasions. And by June, and in June we were here from May the 29th and election Sunday, with 30 electoral authorities and workers from Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, the Dominican Republic, Uruguay, and IDH Capel as the executive secretary. And I'm going to give you the visions that you may understand. I've had to choose some brief points not to take too long, and because I have a lot of material. Since I have 3 missions, I have a lot of material. But there was a constant which was detected from this February and reinforced in June, which was the fact that the institutionality of election in Mexico, that had passed through a discussion period about their rights, autonomy, and scope, had to face the greatest process in the history of Mexico, and it had to do it right in a timely manner. And it was, just as it was, the reaction of the citizens in Mexico regarding this process. And with this in mind, I'm talking about the mission in June. The first to congratulate are the Mexican citizens, because they made this election journey a civic and easy exercise, where in a country where that tranquility is not a common thing. And if there were some episode along this period of February to June and beyond that we have to really regret, that could have cost the life of people involved in the process, generally speaking, the election journey was peacefully given, with crowds everywhere. Well, that was one of the first observations of the mission. We had a high participation from the citizens and a real and important interest to participate, which generated some, groups of voters in that day, that at least in Mexico City was a sunny day, a warm day, that made those cues relevant in some way. So the mission talks about very positive aspects, the capability of logistics and organization of INE, and the materials that were used during the day, both those that go for all voters as well as those that uh, to facilitate the vote of certain group of people, an inclusion mechanism, disabled people or people that have a special condition. Also, the materials for the counting were particularly useful in order to accelerate that stage of a process. As a well, the mission talks about the implementation of initiatives directed to inclusion of populations that were excluded in previous election processes. This in a double way. First, because the implementation of new requirements for the inscription and registration of candidates, which meant an opportunity to make sure the representation of population of sectors that were not always there, but also for the establishment of new ways of voting. For example, for the people that are imprisoned and with the possibility to have an advanced vote in specific circumstances, as well to include 3 modes for the voting of Mexicans in the foreign. So the mission acknowledges as very important this work. Mexico has gone forward importantly in making parity a reality in this country, and I am pretty sure that Gladys will give emphasis in her presentation regarding that topic. But our mission also wants to mention this because what Mexico has done in 10 or 12 years is pretty important regarding being able to have parity in the representation between women and men. And aspects that may be enhanced in the future, well, yeah, for example, from the visited ballots, it is clear that it is important to have an inventory once again of the sites used for ballots. Some of them were not easy to be in, some other have problems of location. We found some in parks, corners of avenues, which endangers, if there is a weather problem, there might be an affection in the electoral process. We know when we say this openly, that's not a decision from INE where they place the ballots. We are aware that this is just the result of a complex architecture of the election system in Mexico that goes down to the actual neighbor that where the ballot is going to be located. But it is important that INE will be able to refine those guidelines in order to know what place is requested in order to have a voting ballot, mainly for the possibility to be there, because it's not only talking about disabled people, but it's something that really has an impact in general flow of electors. We also have better signaling in the balloting places. When we were talking about a place with several ballots, it was kind of difficult to locate one specifically within the center, so this can be enhanced. But a very high point of training of members of voting ballots during that day, they were able to start the balloting, the voting day, and finishing it with an adequate counting of votes. Where the greatest problems there were, the ballot members were those where they were installed and they had problems with electricity in order to identify the votes. There is something that the mission, it's a minor issue, but it's not because it's minor that we are not going to mention it. It's a special ballot, voting ballot. There's a misunderstanding in Mexico about the function of the special voting ballot, and as somebody that has been able to be involved in 100 processes of election in Latin America, Mexico is the only country where you may vote in a voting ballot somewhere else, in another city. Normally, if you're not in your city, you cannot vote. They have developed the institution of a special ballot, voting ballot. That is cool. That's a sovereign decision of Mexico. And second place, it opens options of participation that wouldn't exist otherwise. But people do not always understand. They think that special voting ballot are the criteria of INE, the number of INE determination, and with voting balloting papers defined by INE. It's the product of a political decision that INE just carries out. But we then witnessed moments where people would unjustificatedly say that there were no more voting paper. So they were mad at INE, and that's unfair because they were not able to vote in a special voting ballot. So in the future, it would be a good thing to teach citizens so that they would understand what these ballots are. They are an opportunity, but they would also have to understand it has certain established limitations due to political decisions that go beyond what INE can do. And when teaching this, INE may explain in a better way all these topics. In order to conclude, just to tell you that the mission congratulates the citizens of Mexico for the successful carrying out of this process. We know that there are many things that this electoral process is still to work with regarding some decisions that have to be made. The Mexican people should understand when a campaign starts, when it finishes, and what are the possibilities of these entities during these campaigns. This is a debate that corresponds to you as a nation, and where the mission shall not say anything, but we observe that there are many things that were opened in the framework of this election process, and for sure will be the object of reflection in the academia and the lawmaking organizations, as well as the electoral organs work. Congratulate INE because they made it quite well, and because they carried this out despite the fact that there was a institutional transition that implied the need of accelerated training of certain groups, but the process was okay and the results were offered in a timely manner. And the mission congratulates INE, as well as we thank them for making this labor possible, with the mission in June and the missions in February and April. And we hope that the Mexican democracy will continue flourishing and will be as dynamic as it is today. Thank you very much. Well, we thank once again UNIORE for their report, and we also thank them because, as it was well stated by Jose Thompson, this collaboration between institutions among people that organize elections is always important. We always say that we have to, when we see with external sights what happens in the inside of a place, gives us a fresher vision. But when those eyes do know about the topic, and they are aware and they also performed it, and that's more enriching. And as he also said, is a two-way winning path, because we all get feedback. Those that give observation also learn from our election system, but they also help us when they do the report. So thank you very much. Well, so the work made up during the international observation missions wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration of allies, strategic allies. We welcome, he was here very early. We welcome the electoral counselor Jorge Montaño. Welcome, counselor. Thank you very much for being here. The members of the Executive General Council, the electoral counselor of INE in Mexico City, Erika Estrada, who was a very important ally for our foreign guests would understand the differences between what it means, the globality of the national election system. And I would also especially mention the general direction of political coordination from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because it is always an allied coordination of this institute in, in the logistics, and when we have to greet people from so many countries that come with a very specific purpose. We really thank Dr. Julio Rivas and his whole team our thanks. In order to continue with the presentation of this report, we give the floor to Dr. Gladys Acosta, who's going to give us a report that really that we really like, which is important of international experts in regarding gender. So in this report, we had a group of women, all of them experts in gender, some of them former workers, election workers, some of them also workers from international organizations focused on the warranty of women's rights, and that generated a very rich mission in knowledge and in contributions for the Institute. Thank you very much, Doctor. Please be my guest. Thank you very much, Arlene. I want to first of all thank for this invite from INE and its chairperson, the counselors that are here with us, and very important it was to us, this mission. We had the opportunity not only to work with INE but also with the electoral Trife, and we saw that both entities that make up the institutionality of elections are headed by women, that opened up a pathway to women, and they developed a very relevant actions in the fulfillment of their office period. What I want to tell you is that this mission has a never seen character. There is a long story of electoral observation missions, but this is the very first one, at least as far as we know in our region, that was thought as a goal to contribute of an impartial, independent vision of the electoral process in Mexico as a whole, but that would contribute in promotion of gender equality, and thus making sure a concrete participation, political participation of women, all women, but with some particularities, emphasis given to indigenous women, Afro-descendant women, Afro-Mexican women, and all the other aspects of intersectionality and diversity. The idea was to enhance integrity, equity, efficiency of the electoral federal process 23-24 with these elements. Clear objectives, identifying which were the obstacles that limited women participation in the exercise of their political electoral rights. Secondly, to have a balloting of an analytic information, evaluating the promotion of gender equality and political participation of women in the different aspects of the electoral process in Mexico, so in such a way that we will be able to identify areas of opportunity and good practices. And lastly, strengthening the consolidation of institutions that make part of the democratic system in Mexico, and incorporate in their work this commitment to be able to have parity and equality between women and men. And Arlen stated it, who we were. And we did not make up an organization. We come from different backgrounds and places. Some of us came from the experience of the convention of Segao and the committee, and this was the international supervision of greater objectives of electoral affairs only, that has to do with the political and civil rights of women. Also people that had worked, I'm going to mention them because our chairperson was Mrs. Maria Olinda Barreiro. She's from Paraguay. She was the head of the mission that was unfortunately unable to come here. So she's also a former part of CEDAW committee, Mrs. Katia Uriona from Bolivia, former president of the Electoral Tribunal of Bolivia, who was the technical secretary of the mission, Dr. Rosa Perez de Garcia from the Dominican Republic, holding judge from República Dominicana, former magistrate, head of the electoral in the Dominican Republic. We had the participation of Andrea Tercero Castellon from Honduras, international counselor of electoral processes in Costa Rica, and myself. We had 3 missions. First was from 11th to 14th of March, the second one from the 6th to the 9th of May, that included meetings in Oaxaca, and the third from the 30th of May to the 3rd of June, election. I want to talk to you about our findings. First of all, Mexico has constitutional warranties and a wide and progressive law framework from the state in favor of the exercise of civil and political rights of women. That is also expressed within INE from the implementation of programs and signing of agreements of institutional policies that are focused on the promotion of equality conditions and the eradication of different discrimination ways. And the participation of women is like an iceberg down the ways of discriminations that are actually the ones that have an impact. Not only violence, as we are going to see later on, but also discrimination as a whole is something that is below this iceberg. We have to understand what is behind. But the regulations that we have has had an impact in the influence of the participation of women in the election through the fulfillment of alternancy and parity in the lists of candidates and blocks of competitivity, no tolerance against violence against women, and this criteria called 8 out of 8 that you know well, the affirmative actions, of course, and this financing that we have for the political leadership and candidatureships of women. And secondly, we've learned and we've seen that the adopted measurements for the promotion of parity within the institutional structure locally and in federally speaking, the confirmation of technical unity of gender equality and non-discrimination of INE, as well as the multidisciplinary work for the assessment of political violence regarding gender against women, with programs and attention protocols against gender violence against women. And besides that, the sentences of the electoral power of the TPJ have warranted the application of the parity principle. The affirmative actions also are important. Mandatory fulfillment of coalitions and political parties that favor the political participation of women. I'm talking about those women that have more problems in representation, which are indigenous women, Afro-Mexican women, so on and so forth. Besides that, besides the rest of the other difficulties that we have to have access to political participation, I want to quickly mention that indigenous women that have all this kind of self-adscription, qualified adscription protection is something complex. It's not always fulfilled, and Afro-descendant women also have this problem. It's a self-adscription which is not qualified, but it's simple. But they also observe these problems. Where are these problems? And here we have the fourth finding. Political parties. Political parties that are the most important channels for political expression. According to the testimonies that we have received, they still express within them symptoms of resistance to parity and affirmative actions. But these can be understood, is part of a historic evolution. And it's, to be expected that in future processes there will be greater learning from these experiences and less controversy, probably. I want to talk about some opportunity spaces and challenges for the future. Recommendations. First of all, we have to find it as a great learning historical process. The mission has recommended the reviewing of some footprints detected in the process, that we have to have a systematization later to review, for example, the percentage of candidates registrations that did not comply with party and alternancy, the competitive blocks, and the amendments made, to be aware of what happens with political groups and in which functions do these problems come. We have to systematize the challenging processes. It is important to be aware of the bottom of the causes of challenges. And we also considered an important a report of candidatureships that were invalidated by the suspension of rights once they had not complied of one of the 8 causes that we mentioned. So this will allow us to identify obstacles and propose advancements for the effectivity later on. We also recommend to evaluate the application of tools and measurements to be adopted. Many of them, I'm not going to mention them because there are several, but you all are aware of them. But I want to tell you that we've been called our attentions into a pilot program of first aid, psychological services, guidance, and a legal follow-up into for women under political violence, and it has an intersectional and intercultural focus. We have a report that we received recently. We were told about this in the mission, but it's important to verify their efficiency. We also have to see how a pilot program can become a stable program. And by the same token, we have to articulate this experience with this multidisciplinary group for the attention of political violence in relation to gender against women in elections, because what we need is an institutionality that is harmonized, that would address these kind of problems. On the other side, we can see that we better observe and organize what happens in digital means and social media with this kind of violence exercised not only by women but also against women. It's something that we need to be aware, but we have to analyze this later on. We have some things that are more precise. Usurpation of indigenous identity. Afro-descendants also said that once in a while it happened to them. So they use the positive, which is to have these pathways, fast tracks, but they use it in a wrong way sometimes. What I want to finish up with, because we have not a lot of time, because I want to say something. The political participation of women in the decision-making processes is very influenced by that discrimination that I talked to you about in the beginning. And we must address particularly the most serious ways of discrimination, such as in the case of violence. But not necessarily that's going to solve all the challenges that we have due to the gender discrimination in our societies, and that is manifested actually in the political field or arena. But Mexico, and that the mission saw it in the different moments and opportunities we've had of discussing with the people involved in this. Mexico is a very favorable scenario for eradication of gender discrimination, as long as they maintain the federal and state system aware of the reproduction of these discriminatory ways in all manifestations of social life, economic, and particularly political life of Mexico. That's what really opens up the way to the genuine political participation of women, an element that we are now going to see in next coming 6 years with a a woman president. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gladys Acosta, and thanks to all the members of the mission that had a very, very enriching objective, because one of the features this institute has, INE, is that we do not take anything for granted. We have a very strong legislation regarding parity. We have a unity of gender equality and non-discrimination, which is strong, and with the purpose to work pretty hard, but not we do not let what we have done as the end of things, but only the base of everything. And each and every process of election that we have had, we go forward, and we have had very important things that has led us to the moment we have today. And so it has led us a lot of things we have gained regarding parity and inclusion of vulnerable groups in the public life of our country. So thank you very much. And I take advantage of this space to thank a fundamental part of this institute. And I've always said that my heart is there. With a lot of pleasure, I welcome Maria Luisa Flores, spokesperson of Mexico City of the INE, which is in the local boards, where we do have strong work and on everyday tasks of the electoral process, and those are the ones that have all the work and make possible every person to vote. So thank you very much for your work, and because of all these visits, were the most visited districts in Mexico City. So it was every day we received the support, and thank you very much to the people from Mexico City that were here. We really thank you for your work, because you were here always helping our foreign visitors. Thank you very much. And in order to go on, it's a mission that they were in district counting. So this enriches. This is it's a long journey, but we finished the journey, and we still continue in the local boards, working in the countings. And this is something that is not seen, because what is seen is ended up in the day of the election. So we welcome Nicolas Liendo to present the technical accompanying of the international report. One of his main elements is to see district countings. So thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you very much, Arlen. We thank as the international the invitation given by INE in order to participate for this international accompanying technical election mission. We also want to extend greetings and thankful to the consular chairperson and the consulars that are here today, and the electoral workers and the general public that is seeing us virtually, and the colleagues from the other missions that accompanied INE, and the colleagues that accompanied, and each and every one of them from their area of experience try to contribute with INE and the democratic institutionalization of Mexico. So greetings from the head of IDEA International in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, who was the head of a mission, Marcela Rio Tobar, and from each and every one of those that made part of this electoral mission. Without any longer delay, I will go as fast as possible to take my 10 minutes, Arlene. So, the IDEA International's mission of technical assistance had 3 moments, a first one from the 24th to the 29th of April, where we also participated or went to the second debate in Churubusco studios. And then we had the mission number 2 that happened before the election day from the 29th of May to June the 2nd, and the third mission post election from the 3rd to the 6th of June. In the framework of the work agreement and we have between INE and the International from a long time ago, we were there with the INE's summoning to have these technical assistance in two parts, a gender part and a gender of the environment of information of the information. As for parity, we found happily many coincidences with what was stated by colleague Gladys Acosta from CEDAW, and I give information of the institutional advancements. Mainly, we observe the speed and the amount of advancements that we have as regards of gender in the country due to the institutional means, but it also had an effect on the cultural debates and population regarding how, why, and where shall we go forward in as regard of gender and the political participation of Mexican women in the country. These elections also constituted an important point of effective representation and participation of women in the democratic history of Mexico, not only for the implementation of the amendment as regard of parity at all levels, but also the different advancements in financing for women, but also for the third time of Latin America, two women ended up first and second. Later, before, Cristina Carreon and Kirchner in Chile, Michelle Bachelet, Evelyn Matei, were the only two countries where two women fought for the presidency of the country. In the case of Mexico, never had a woman had been elected president. So we also mention and we want to highlight this result and this opportunity of effective participation. And adding up ourselves to what Gladys mentioned about CEDAW, we see this evolution not only at an institutional maximum level of the executive, but also at the interior, inside of other organizations. But besides the advancements of the institutional and the regulation, but there's a certain kind of institutional commitment through the different countries or organizations with more women governors, presidents of the Supreme Court, the president of the electoral, the INE counselor, and more electoral counselors, and locally too. So, in the last years, the force and advancements have been good and highly important in the country, which shows us an evolution of critical mass of the topic and the need of convincement from the institution and the population on the advancements. Here we have some of the recently published results by INE, where we can see the advancement of federal deputations, of federal local deputations. Parity is clear regarding what in the past there was. We have reported it in the INE page. We see differently from, at level of presidents, municipalities presidents. We still need to work there, but the graph is very obvious, and to show just 5 of them should have this greater amount of women, while the rest of the states or federal entities have some work to do regarding this topic. But in general terms, the evolution trend is positive, and A second part of that we observe is the politic violence against women due to gender. This is closer and recent normative and institutional regulation. And INE has worked, as well as the electoral entities locally speaking, have worked enough not only to develop protocols, actions, and implement the normative, but also to look to try to reach the public or candidate women or men to make them understand how to reach this way of discriminate permanent discrimination way is still in our societies. What we see is that INE had communication campaigns through different means, on site, printed, virtual, as well as documentation, guidelines, training courses. So there was a great variety, amount and quality of documents and way to show the work and try to reach, and in order to institutionalize these regulations and spread them, we also highlight the pilot program. Not to repeat, there are some data there: 22 women, 4,400 total services, and amount of them were psychological services, and 267 in the legal field. And also to highlight the sanctioned people national list, regarding violence against the women in relation of gender. So the registration advanced in the last time I checked. In the moment of the final of the election, we had 349 people that were sanctioned. And as we see there, it's not only men but also women, as the SEDA also said. A last thing that I'm going to highlight is the work made by INE with other organizations from civil society, with other platforms in this case. That is to say that we see very positively how INE and other electoral institutions and the electoral Mexican institution goes beyond its traditional tasks to establish links and work together with civil society organizations that are specific to every topic, with platforms, private sector, that is to say, with other public institutions, and also with the academia and experts, not only to produce knowledge but also to develop concrete actions, in this case against political violence against women in relation to gender. The Gold platform, Meta platform, we hired some courses, documentation, and training courses to eradicate political violence, and digitally to also we have a series of actions regarding sexist hashtags. There were, the increasing use, not yet at the levels of other global levels of AI, generative AI, for the production of knowledge, but it's something that worries us a little bit more every time. The purpose of these kind of actions is to legitimate and also silence and exclude women candidates that are particularly sensible to this kind of manipulation and de-information. And not only against them, many times we could see that it was against close people to them, which affects not only violence as itself, that is to say the action, but it also spreads systemically a series of fears and risks and psychological impacts on the other candidates that many times decide not to become candidates, not to participate due to these kind of consequences. The advancements of Olympia law and the creation of technical unity against discrimination and equity. And I go to the second topic, the information surroundings or environment. We think that we can see here a series of features that, globally speaking, we see in this year of the super cycle, election cycle, with more than 70 national elections worldwide, which is the high concentration of communication means, journalists endangered, which is something common use in Latin America, particularly regarding electoral or right defense matters, hyperpolarization and high levels of violence, generally speaking, but also have an impact, particularly or is exacerbated in the electoral processes, new technologies like generative AI, and the information campaigns, fake news, and anti-democratic narratives, which in the election moment require or have a greater dissemination and visibility, and of course scope. Here, some of the actions on the part of INE, against the information, which as was Certeza campaign 2024, an example of documentation of fake posting regarding the fact that there was going to be a fraud on the ballot displacement, the criteria of decision making that are clearly with very clear protocols that have been published and advertised. The collaboration of fast check organizations that collaborate with the electoral institutionality and with the citizens in general, telling when there is information about there was going to be a possibility to migrants that have no way to vote or they have no right to vote. But this fake news sometimes spread so fast that requires some sort of adaptation, because once installed, it's de-estimated publicly and arrive to the very same amount of people that the estimation that reached the fake news. Also, the creation of chat box in Este Responde, WhatsApp collaboration, Meta and Instagram, Frank Press agency. So we see a great amount of actions in order to get together in efforts, because the defense of the election integrity is not just a task of the electoral organizations. Here we are all together committed so that we may have an election with certain criteria, and that these elections will go with the features that responds to the integrity of the actual election. Certain lessons and challenges, I'm not going to mention them all, but in the gender part, there is still some challenges at a subnational level in order to have the transversal parity. In Mexico, we think that we've gone forward regarding the participation as one of the countries which are a reference worldwide in the legal development and organizational development of elections regarding parity. And we also believe that there is a challenge to keep on working together with the political parties to interiorize those regulations and the behaviors and practices that are very rooted in themselves. And we're doing this, and we have to continue persisting and working. And as for the political violence against women due to their gender, to evaluate the impact of the measurements, the different protocols and regulations, and strengthen the interinstitutional coordination from the use of tools to prevent and solve effectively violent actions. As for the challenges of the surroundings of information, we identified that regarding plurality, we have to focus on the vulnerable communities to prevent and warranty equitative access to information, revert certain trends that exist in communication, and to continue with digital literacy campaigns, so as long as electoral processes go advancing, we have to have access to information. Regarding institutional development, to establish a specialized team online to continue working and deepening the work that we have with platforms, with civil organizations. And here we have a challenge which is more repetitive regarding the political financing and the digital surroundings. It's pretty complex for the platforms due to the way of spreading of fake content, how to make the suitable adjustments so that there would be no accidents in the financing um, limits. And what we see each and every time, the incidence was not great in this election, but next elections will have a greater predominance in the use of social media, and we have to act in their evaluation and periodic evaluations of systems. That is to say, in the digital surroundings, our digitalization team, internationally speaking, participated in second and third missions, and they saw how in the different countries in the world, you think that you've reached the system that is going to protect us regarding digitalization, but next year there is an update. There are new ways, new transnational modalities of attacks to the electoral systems or linking the spreading of fake information. So we want to finish by highlighting a comprehension that we saw from the Institute of Elections with Integrity as an Electoral Ecosystem, which is democratic. That need was assessed very positively, that there is our self proactive perception to go out and work with the political parties and the movements and international cooperation in here and others with organization from the civil society and empowering effectively their knowledge and contributions to the process with experts and scholars and other organizations of elections with the government and the communication means, alternative and traditional means, which we believe there is a great effort here, which is very valuable, that we have to make better every time, because this is what allows us to have actions to the future to prevent and proactively also to develop and protect the election system. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you very much, Idea, for the report that you are presenting today. And as I said, without the collaboration of everyone, it would have been impossible to see the reality of the electoral system in Mexico, because it's also a very big system, which it's a good thing that you ended up with this slide, because this slide says it all. We built it participating all of us from different sides and different angles, and it's paramount that those people that come from other places can see it. So it's pretty important to acknowledge the support that we have received from means of communication, the academia, the experts, civil society institutions that somehow gave their time so that our missions would be able to see from other perspective and from other points of view what happened in Mexico. So they had meetings with many people that gave their time and space to give information from other points of view of the electoral process to the missions that were with us. So thank you very much. And for the last report today, we are going to give the floor to Fernanda Guri. You can hear me. To introduce us the report of the International Mission for Electoral System, IFES. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you also on behalf of my colleague Maximo Saldivar, Regional Chair for Latin American at IFES, that was not able to be here, but we would like to congratulate INE and electoral local organizations, to the Tribunal for the excellent work they performed. And to begin with, I would like to clarify that we didn't have an institutional mission of IFES. We were invited the members from different missions. So here we have more information. We have colleagues with the INE mission, the electoral judiciary and the Federation Power, some colleagues from the Electoral Institution of Mexico, and I was with the Electoral Transparency. My colleagues were in Mexico City, I was in Veracruz, and we were from the 29th of May to the 3rd of June. So it was a very short mission. We observed voting ballots in Mexico, Veracruz, but only during the election day and some days before and after. Oh, so it's not an institutional report, but only a compilation of personal observation of the different missions. Before anything, I would like to say that we saw a high level of professionalization, independency from INE, and collaboration that was also very good and very important for the process. The logistics and organization in the voting ballots was perfect. Almost all of them had the papers and materials needed. The signaling instructions were okay, and almost all the ballots that we saw, and the training of ballot location workers, they knew how to do their job. So we saw the presence of delegates, of parties in all the ballot places. We observed the process. We guaranteed the transparency, the accessibility to the ballots, and Jose also talked about it. Some ballots were not completely accessible, but generally speaking, we saw that there was an effort to maintain this accessibility. We saw some delays in the opening of the ballot places, and also delays to begin with the counting of votes. And there were some places that it was dark, it was at night, so it was harder to begin where there's not a necessary structure or infrastructure. So we also observed some ballots that had electronic voting ballots. There's a photograph with the result of these electric ballots, and so that seemed to us perfect. And also, as I heard a little bit from Jose, the special voting ballots was one of the most interesting points. The main challenges in there was a lack of understanding of what a special ballot location is, and that's an exception, because there are not very many countries that would allow voters to vote outside their places. But there's a lack of understanding. It seems to us that it would be like if it were like a right of everyone to be able to the special voting ballots. But there's a limited number of papers. In my special voting ballot, I heard journalists have said that there's a lot of voting ballotings. But yeah, but they were like the normal voting ballot papers. So there's this lack of understanding from the population. And as I said, I went to Veracruz, and there are many students in Veracruz that do not change their location, so that they have to go to a special voting ballot. But also when there are more than 1,000 papers. Also confusion when with the special and ordinary voting ballots when they're in the same place, because they see that there are ordinary voting ballots with the possibility to vote, but they're for the people that were there to vote, but they were not able to be there. So this contributes to this false perception of an intentional deprivation of electoral rights. And we have some photos of this special voting ballot. There was a movement outside the ballot that would say that they were not respecting their rights. and some other observations and challenges that are general, that are not necessarily for the election day, but also politic violence. They've also talked about it, political assassinations, the influence of organized crime, candidate intimidation, which is something serious. And the other topic is the abuse of state resources during campaign, the access that some candidates may have to these resources, administrative resources, and that's the process which is makes the process less fair. And during their journey, also candidates that declared as winners before the official results from INE, which is also a problem for the integrity of information. And generally speaking, law initiatives and electoral amendments, that we don't know what the consequences will be in the independency of the public organizations. As opportunities, very quickly, our colleagues also talked about the prevention of political violence, this cooperation between institutions and other state organizations and political parties and candidates to guarantee the safety, physical and psychological safety of candidates, and also from the observers and the ballot volunteers, and the optimization of the special voting ballots campaigns to incentivize voters to change their addresses, to update their addresses, because if they're outside their cities, information, for journalists and member of public communications, so that they will know how to communicate the population what special voting ballots are for, and what they can do to guarantee their right to vote in the ordinary voting ballots, and the prevention of inadequate use of state resources. And of course, everything is under the control of electoral organizations, but to make it clear in the rules for the use of means of communication during campaigns, and the differentiation between necessary information from the government to the population, and in comparison to electoral campaigns, what kind of information can be said that is a campaign and not information to the public, and the application of sanctions in order to prevent those infractions and guarantee a fair process for all candidates. And that would be it. Thank you very much. Well, for time's sake, and we're going to leave all of us to different entities in the country, I'm just going to end up by saying that within the national election system, we have to acknowledge, with this kind of structure among us, with this great structure, which is the political electoral structure of Mexico. I really like this image that they had. We are a national election institute and 32 federal institutions that we make up the national system of election. Only in the administrative part, there's a parallel structure with the same dimensions. So it is important to us that these reports are not only to be here in Mexico City. So in this time, we'll go each and every one of the experts to a different entity of the Federation today. And we are going to 5 entities in total. This is a first objective where we want to inform 32 entities directly on the way we've been working internationally. And in this time, we have to go to the state of Mexico, to Nuevo León, Guanajuato, Baja California, and Quintana Roo. And also, at this time, we have Mexico City with their members, and a counselor from Mexico City, because it is important to understand the integrality of this system. And as for what is pretty important to talk about before closing this event, it's true that they are not forced, the international organizations, neither foreign visitors that come to the electoral process to have a report. We have received 10 reports from electoral missions where we talk about some of the aspects that we talked about today. We had a representation of 4 of them, but we have in the QR code that you can see in our page, we have 10 reports, and we know that in the coming days we'll be receiving reports from missions that came from the European Union that are still making up their final report. So it's very enriching, all this information that we can find here. It's indeed, it really contributes to one of these elements that we talked about the integrity of the election, that is made up by many elements, and some of them are external, such in this case, the people that come from other countries to see how we have this election process in Mexico. So I want to really thank everyone here that were with us for the very first time in the history. We had more than 1,000 visitors that were in our country. We had 1,309 requests and more than 1,000 that were in the country. So it's a great success for Mexico to make this election process more open to the exterior and to the interior also. We thank you for your presence here, and now we only have to invite you to still be in the events of the Department of International Affairs of this institute, because it's our everyday work that we perform from each and every department. Thank you very much. ¿Sabes qué? Dile que voy rápido al baño y voy a recoger mi credencial.